I found an article by Military Times about a classified operation supporting the Saudis in Yemen, um, and I'll read it and give my thoughts afterward. One of three new classified operations initiated by the Pentagon earlier this year was launched to support Saudi Arabia and other partner nations operating in Yemen, recent reports and documents have revealed. As the Yemen war, raging for more than 3 years, has reached historic levels of humanitarian crisis, including mass starvation, civilian deaths, and cholera outbreaks, U.S. arms sales and support with intelligence and logistics for Saudi military operations has come under increased scrutiny. Operation Yukon Journey was named in a recent quarterly report by the Department of Defense Inspector General's office, but the initial note, only a few paragraphs in a 130-page document, referred to three named operations that were classified, two in Africa, one in the Middle East. All three operations were in support of the larger efforts which seek to defeat both ISIS and al-Qaida. A document posted on the All Partners Access Network, an information sharing website for the Pentagon and non-governmental organizations, revealed a list of military operations by combatant commands since February, when Defense Secretary Jim Mattis designated the three new operations. Yukon Journey falls under Central Command and defined as support to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and partner nations in Yemen. Mattis announced recently that the United States will stop refueling Saudi aircraft fighting Houthi rebels in Yemen, though the United States will continue to provide military assistance and training. But the refueling halt will likely have little impact on Saudi capabilities. In a statement, the Saudi government said it had increased its capabilities to independent conduct in-flight refueling and therefore requested cessation of in-flight refueling support for its operations in Yemen. That means that they had finally, become what they needed to be and don't need the U.S.'s help anymore, according to them. The link between the IG report and the recent document posting was first published on the Secrecy News blog of the Federation of American Scientists and later reported by Yahoo News. Despite officials and IG spokesmen, defense officials and IG spokesmen declined to share details of the classified operation with Yahoo. The recent war began in 2014 when Houthi rebels overtook Sana'a, the Yemen capital, as the Iranian-aligned Shiite rebels moved south toward Aden. A coalition of Arab nations led by Saudi Arabia entered the fray in 2015 to defeat them and reinstate the overthrown Yemeni government. The more contentious portion of the fighting has recently been focused on the port city of Houdeida, though with flows more than three-quarters of the food, medicine, and other necessities. Yemeni government and Arab coalition forces have pushed in recent days through bloody battles and barrage to retake Houdeida from the Houthis, who've held it since the war's inception. A previous assault began and then halted in June. At that time, U.S. and United Nations officials sought to bring the sides to the table for peace negotiations. Those aims fell short and fighting resumed. Earlier this year, Robert Karim, Assistant Secretary of International Security Affairs for the Pentagon, told Congress that there were about 50 U.S. military personnel assisting the Saudi military with pilot advising, refueling, and intelligence. Congressional leaders have reportedly called on the Trump administration to limit or halt arms sales. Some say the October 2nd killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post columnist and a critic of Saudi Arabia's crown prince, has helped ratchet up pressure on the U.S. and other allies to limit or reduce support to the Saudis. Officials in Turkey have said that Khashoggi was strangled and dismembered in the consulate in Istanbul by an assassination squad, including agents close to the prince. But Mattis has said that the U.S.'s involvement has helped limit casualties, saying U.S. influence on the air campaign has made a difference in making instances of errant bombing and in reducing instances of errant bombing and the target of civilians. The U.S. will also continue working with the coalition in Yemen to minimize civilian casualties and expand upon humanitarian efforts throughout the country, he said. In the IG's quarterly report released earlier this month and covering July to September reviews of OIR, The authorities noted that Pentagon officials were unable to produce complete answers to some questions in time for the report's publication. The IG sent Defense Department officials questions related to the operations, including the objectives of the operations, the metrics used to measure progress, the cost of the operations, the number of U.S. personnel involved, and the reason why the operations were declared overseas contingency operations. The Pentagon provided classified responses to some of the questions submitted according to the IG report. So, first off, Mattis's line, this thing he says about how U.S. involvement has helped limit casualties is not true. You don't provide cluster bombs, weapons that are illegal by international law for a reason, without seeking to kill as many people as possible. You just don't. So that's not correct. And that is a significant comment for me to make, because up until now, Mattis has been the one member of the current administration I happen to really like, or like at all, because he actually knows what he's talking about in most instances. But that's him trying to excuse their operation over there, which has always been to make money off of the Saudis, and to turn a blind eye to how those things are done. And this is a policy that I at first had thought would be seen as unpopular by loads and loads of people, but I've slowly realized there are individuals who they don't care. I talk about this with recurrence because I want it to be a continuous thing in people's minds. And because ever since I found out the actual number of casualties of 10,000 civilian deaths, as well as over 800,000 cases of cholera, that bothers me. So when I read a report like this about a classified operation, this Yukon Journey, where they're talking about, where was it again? I want to read the exact, what it's defined as according to to Central Command. Support to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and partner nations in Yemen. Now, I want you to think about this. If we've come to the conclusion as a collective whole of people that the Saudis are responsible for all of those deaths, because it's them using these weapons that the U.S. has built to perpetuate all of these killings, and our defense secretary is saying that our involvement is minimalizing casualties, concurrent, remember, with all of the deaths that the Saudis have been behind, does that not seem to you to be a conflicting statement? Think about that. Our Operation Yukon Journey, an American classified operation, says support to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and partner nations in Yemen. That's its official mission statement. And the Saudis have been confirmed to kill thousands of Yemen civilians. And we're being told by our defense secretary, oh no, the U.S. being involved has helped to minimize casualties. Does anyone believe that? Anybody? And what I find so comical is that a lot of times when someone reads an article, and I know that when I sit there and read that for 4, 5, 10 minutes, it gets boring. But I read the whole thing because I want to present it in its full. This article, it's a really good article, that does not seem to really paint, even if it kind of presents the narrative of this is a bad thing, it still goes fact by fact, which I respect. But there's this thing about people where a lot of times when they read these articles, when they go and they check these out, they don't internalize. They don't say, wait, secret operation, what's the big deal about that? We already knew the U.S. was complicit in this. But it's significant because when Trump signs off on something, and I bring him up because he's the executive branch, a lot of people will dismiss it as, oh, he didn't realize the ramifications of what all was going on. Well, this operation had to have been clarified by someone in his administration, who was able to get other people to support it, and thereby let it pass, let it go through. And it's being continued at a time when the closest thing the Saudis have gotten to any rightful criticism is over one man's death. And whenever you bring it up, people assume you think Khashoggi meant nothing. when, you know, the whole point of me saying, wow, I can't believe you're that pissed because that one person died, is because for 3 years we've had thousands of people die. Nobody seemed to care unless they lived over there. So the bottom line is that we have a very crappy system where all of these people are getting murdered for money. A lot of Trump supporters, if you tell them this, bring up Obama starting it, which I've, you know, criticized him for it as well. You know, this isn't the I Hate Trump show. It's not the Vote Democrat show. It's the I'm sick of terrible policies, whether they're continued by one party or the other. And until Americans can develop a code of ethics for what they allow their government and the people who run it to support, this will continue. So, thank you.